And joining me now for an exclusive interview is Roland Paris, Professor of Public and International Affairs at the University of Ottawa and ex-advisor to the former Prime Minister of Canada, Justin Trudeau. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
So as we go to where we're hearing about this US push on the table for Ukraine to retreat from the Donbas, to turn the region into a demilitarized zone, President Zelenskyy saying any land concessions would be put to a referendum. Does this show, the fact that he's talking about a referendum, that Kyiv is seriously considering more compromise than before?
Well, I think Kyiv is in a position where they have to navigate their relations with the Trump administration. They certainly don't want to be perceived in Washington and by Trump in particular as an obstacle to peace. But on the other hand, the Trump administration just released its national security strategy. It talked about trying to reestablish what it called strategic stability with Russia, but it doesn't seem to recognize that strategic stability with Russia is going to require strength in order to deter Russia. So it's really unclear where Trump is going to end up going with this.
Let's talk about that security strategy, because it's been almost a week since that dossier landed on our desks. Donald Trump, of course, doubling down on the, quote, his quote, decaying Europe. Your Prime Minister Mark Carney has described Canada as the most European of non-European countries. Is Donald Trump going after Brussels and Ottawa and towards Moscow in one fell swoop here?
Well, Canada doesn't get much mention in the national security strategy, and that's probably a good thing. But I think that there's a fair degree of concern about that strategy here in Ottawa for a number of reasons. One, we've already hinted at it. It really is quite, conciliatory towards Russia and very harsh towards European allies. And these are among our closest democratic friends in the world in Canada as well. Secondly, that strategy talks about directly interfering in the domestic politics of democratic countries in order to promote more MAGA or right-wing populist type movements and parties. And thirdly, and this is maybe directly relevant to Canada, it really does set out a vision of spheres of influence in the world where powerful countries should have more or less open capacity to decide what they do within their own regions. And so in the Western Hemisphere, there are some questions being raised about what this means for Canada, how much room for maneuver we'll continue to have in our foreign policy.
I've read a few headlines today. Trump's terrifying new security doctrine turns Canada into a target, or Trump's national security strategy ends Canada's security discount. You mentioned the spheres of influence there. It all comes down to this Monroe Doctrine, right? Because if America is asserting a sphere of influence and Canada sits within that sphere and Europe sits on the outer, is Ottawa's sovereignty at stake here, as some have suggested?
Well, this sovereignty has been challenged by President Trump since he came into office, when he said that Canada should be the 51st state of the United States. And you saw the response from Canadians, a quite remarkable patriotic response from Canadians in terms of asserting their own sovereignty. Much of the national security doctrine, when it's talking about the Monroe Doctrine, the national security strategy is really talking about Latin America. On the other hand, he has expressed interest in Canada. He's expressed interest in Greenland. And this is something that we're very mindful of, because the same government of Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, also wants to strengthen the Canadian partnership with allies in Europe and with partners in the Indo-Pacific region. I think it's going to take more complicated diplomacy from Canada to be able to pull that off. The United States position towards Canada is less clear than it is towards Latin America, but it does change the world that we've been operating in, and it's a matter of some concern here.
If we go a bit broader, are we in a world now where America is giving up ground to Russia and to China? I guess where America is saying, we'll handle our patch and you guys have it at it in yours.
There's an element of that. I don't think it's as simple as that. If you read the China sections of the national security strategy, it's really talking about maintaining a very strong deterrent capability towards China right up to the first island chain. So that's Japan, Taiwan, Philippines, and the like. So that implies a pretty substantial ongoing American security presence. It talks about Europe in very different terms, basically saying European countries should be much more responsible for their own defense, and criticizing European countries as losing their way. A lot of projection going on there, as psychologists might say, talking about, Europe being transformed by immigration and the like. So I think that there's not as much clarity in the, in the spheres of influence logic of the national security strategy as you suggested, but it is a shift towards a spheres of influence logic, and that's something that have to be very careful about. It does change the world we're operating in, so we'll see what it really means in practice going forward.
I want to ask about NATO, because last time we spoke, you told me we must be able to actively and effectively resist Russia. Now, the thing is, NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte told us that, quote, we are Russia's next target and we are already in harm's way. And he also says Russia will be able to, quote unquote, feel any alliance response. But in your mind, is Vladimir Putin really worried about how NATO might make him feel if he keeps up these hybrid threats?
I think there's two distinct questions. One is what NATO can do to put pressure on Putin with regard to Ukraine. There's a separate question about whether Putin is deterred from directly attacking NATO countries. I'm not talking about the very disturbing probes, including drones in Poland and elsewhere. I'm talking about attacking. I think Vladimir Putin continues to be deterred by NATO, but this is absolutely essential. And the Trump uncertainty about the American commitment to Europe is the big problem with that is that it undermines the stated goal of the Trump administration, which is to restore, quote unquote, strategic stability with Russia. You do that, as people in Poland well know, with strength, not by threatening consequences to Russia, but by demonstrating your willingness to defend yourself at all costs. And Canada will continue to be a very active participant in NATO, especially as Canadian defense spending is expected to rise very significantly over the next few years, regardless of what happens with American policy towards NATO.
Well, something people here in Poland are very interested about, of course, is Article 5, this clause that says an attack on one is an attack on all. Because I'm interested in your view on this, because if Donald Trump thinks Europe is weak and decaying, surely he won't be running in to help fight Russia. So is Article 5, or at least its message of deterrence, somewhat dead in the water?
I don't think it's dead in the water. I think that there are question marks around it now because of the vagueness, the ambiguity in Donald Trump's statements relating to Article 5. When asked whether he would respond to various scenarios, he said it depends on the circumstances. So that's not the we will defend every inch of NATO that we were hearing from Joe Biden previously. Having said that, I think that the positive side, if I can put it, of the Trump administration's treatment of Europe is that it really has provoked quite a shift in the European discussion on defense. And this is an important shift because Europe is many, many, many times the economic strength of Russia, but hasn't translated that economic strength into military might or geopolitical weight. And unfortunately, this is the time that Europe is going to have to do that, and Canada is going to contribute to that from far away, but we're in Latvia, and I would expect to see the Canadian contribution continuing, if not expanding, in the years to come.
And we're running out of time, but I do want to briefly end where we started. You mentioned Canada. Is it now clear that Canada is the reliable partner for Europe, not the United States?
Well, I will let European countries and the EU make that decision itself. I think there's no question that Canada is
But you must have a view, sir.
In my mind, I think that Canada is a more reliable partner than the United States, but the United States is a more important partner than Canada because of the scale of the American economy and security guarantees. So European countries have to manage that relationship with the United States no matter what. But Canada is absolutely a more reliable partner for Europe than the United States. And I hope that the initiatives that are underway now to deepen that partnership even further, including by cooperating in defense investment and other measures, will continue to strengthen the partnership between Canada and Europe, which is important for Canadians too.
Professor Roland Paris, thank you so much for your time, as always, here on TVP World.
Thank you.
And that's all for World News tonight. Do stay with us on TVP World for more. I'm Dahmen. Good night.